But and I think part of the problem is that there's probably not enough of those conversations happening.
Man, Rod, don't empty the clip. Save some for next week.
I know, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, and success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing we call life. On today's episode, our topic is role models and success stories. And we're going to have Brother Ray kick us off.
Real quick for me, I had to look up the definition, or I chose to look up the definition of what a role model is. And, it said basically that is someone's behavior that you would want to emulate. And I've been blessed throughout my entire life to have a series of role models, but my number one role model was my dad. He was the first person to teach me how to be a man, and it doesn't get by me that I'm one of the lucky ones that actually had a father in the home. I had both of my parents in the home, but being able to see my dad go to work every day and provide for his family, even though my mother was a working mother, but my dad was literally the head of the house. That's what he was, the head of the house. And just growing up and watching him and seeing how he behaved as a man and as a human being made me want to emulate him. So my number one role model is my dad. And of course, I have a ton of role models, including you brothers, both of my daughters, my wife, and other family and friends. But my number one role model was my dad. And I'm sure we'll touch base a little bit further as we go on.
Role models. Wow. One, I just want to say I certainly have always recognized the importance of having one, and not necessarily use that term, but just looking for someone to be able to emulate. Quite honestly, I don't know that enough of us have had enough choices regarding role models, but I identified my dad as well as my role model, and with a little unique twist to it. So although I never actually met my dad, that I can remember, since he passed when I was 22 months old, everything I've come to learn about him informed me as to why I would always want to emulate him. It also informed me regarding some of my own characteristics and beliefs that seem to be passed down through DNA. Things like his even-tempered nature, the care and concern that he had and held deeply for our family and those less fortunate, as well as his ability to impact others' lives. And so, without ever even knowing him, but coming to understand that, those were things that were core to who he was, it always gave me a sense of closeness to him. And I kind of focused on that rather than the things that I didn't have by never getting to really know him. not knowing what his voice sounded like, or not knowing what his touch felt like, or what his scent smelled like. I've always moved in ways that I believe he would want me to, or in ways that would make him proud. It caused me to be more obedient to my mother. It governed the way I conducted myself on the streets of Philadelphia. It helped me become more focused in school. Even though I didn't necessarily care about it, I always thought about how he would want me to behave and perform. And then it also drove me to want to experience, some level of success that I didn't necessarily see within the community that I grew up in. But just knowing, how important education was to him, and, the dreams that were shared with me that he had for our lives together, it just seemed to fall in line with some of the things that I've come to want and desire out of life. So my dad certainly was my dude. And I would tell anyone that doesn't have a relationship with their father, but still have an opportunity to fix that, whether they become your role model or not, I certainly think it would be worthwhile to at least make the attempt.
I would have to say that my mom was my original role model. And of course, I didn't, like most um, kids, I don't think we necessarily view our parents as role models when we're that age. Contextually speaking, that's just not how, we see them. But, I define a role model as someone whose behaviors, someone's morals and values are worthy of admiration and emulation. And so my mom was certainly that, right? Without a doubt. Um, she was a single mom. And I know I've talked about my mom a handful of times on the show, on the podcast, but, single mom. My mom was 17 when I was born. She was a few months from turning 18 when I was born. And she was just that person, and she always showed me love. We grew up, right, I'm from Newark, New Jersey, right? We grew up in the hood, and she just always, I saw her hustle, right, essentially to get food on our table, and to keep a roof over our head. Now I know she had some help, from family and stuff like that, but she was the one doing it. And so her morals and values were, and she was a Christian. And so just watching her, and seeing how she, moved through life was the she was the first person that I saw, and the first person to teach me how to do things the right way, right? How to treat women, how to all the different things, right? And then to go the opposite direction. I know the show is about role models, but Rod talked about having an opportunity to meet your father if you can. My biological is my anti role model, right? We all have anti role models, I believe, as well in our lives, who show us what not to do. And I met, actually I didn't even meet, I saw my biological father once in my life when I was 14 years old. We didn't even actually meet, but just the fact that he wasn't there. And don't get me wrong, this isn't a sob story. I'm not one of those. I never grew up feeling like I miss my dad. I just wasn't one of those people. I had a lot of male role models in my life who were there and did all the things, and I was never. I hear a lot of people, "Oh, I miss doing this. I wish I had my dad in my life. I could have done this. I could have done that." And I don't knock that. I understand that. But fortunately for me, I was never that person. I never once, not one single time in my entire existence of life, did I feel like I was missing something because my biological father wasn't in my life. And I know that's probably the exception versus the rule, but it's just it is what it is, and it was what it was. But yeah, but my mom was just, she did everything. And I had an opportunity to watch her. And even though I'm sure I didn't again, as kids, you don't appreciate those sorts of things at that age. But I did. I even at a young age, I understood um, that what she was doing was not easy. I didn't have the awareness that I do now as far as the extent of how hard that was, but I knew it was hard. I had that much awareness to know that it could not have been easy to do what she was doing, and to raise as a single mom raising a black son on her own in the hood. That just kind of added to the fact that she was, to everything else. So, my mom was my first role model, and
Um,
I'll
my role model is my grandmother. Or that's at least what I want to start with. I love the fact that I got to thinking and I was like, wow, we get to go a lot of directions in this show because I mean, that's a start. Just to preview, I'm gonna definitely these four gentlemen that are, let's see on the screen. That's my right hand. It might not look like the right hand when y'all say, but this is my right hand. So y'all aren't to my right, y'all are to my left. Okay, well there you go. These four gentlemen to my left. I need to stop mirroring the screen. It'd be messing me up. But my grandmother is one of the first role models I want to talk about because I look at her and she was raising children on her own in the 60s as a Black woman. Because I think my youngest uncle was either born in 59 or 60. So here she is as a Black woman. Her and my biological grandfather got divorced in the 60s and she's raising 5 kids on her own. Navigating life as a Black woman. My biological grandfather passed when my mom was 16. So now she has 5 kids dealing with that grief and that trauma. And she lost a child. My uncle was killed when I was just a little bit past 2 years old. And, I just grew up with her. I grew up in an interesting situation. There weren't a lot of positive role models as far as the men go. My uncle was a good role model, but he was young and he moved to St. Louis and Chicago when I was very young. So I was surrounded by aunts, cousins, and my grandmother, who were all women. And my grandmother was absolutely, she was the rock, man. She was patient. She was even keeled. Man, if somebody needed something to eat, somewhere to stay, we didn't have a lot. We had nothing, but she always found a way to help other people. Man, she was so well respected, not only in the community, but at church and just around. Man, I remember we would go to certain stores and her name just had credit. She'd be like, I don't have any money right now, but I'll pay you back at this time. And man, whatever she needed, man. And she was just solid, man. And, I learned a lot from her. Me and my mom were talking about it the other day, and my mom was saying, she had hurt her hip doing something. I said, Mom, you be doing too much. She said, I learned that from my mama. And I was like, yeah, I mean, all the way up. Like, I remember my grandmother because she was in her 50s when I was born. She was in her 70s, and she was still doing everything, cooking, cleaning, running errands, going back and forth and all this, that, and the other. And she was just so solid. And then when I look at why I'm able to, kind of show up the way that I have in my life, in my career, for family, like, show up whether I'm feeling up or down, show up when I'm not feeling well or whatever. I got that from her. She just was consistent. And a lot of folks lack consistency. They got a lot of razzle dazzle, but they don't got consistency. And man, my grandmother was so consistent. She was just everything. That's my girl, man. So that's my role model. Cliftine Marie Chandler Banks. That is my role model.
People, start talking about our dads. And at first I was like, yeah, I'm gonna talk about my dad, like, Ray was talking about. One of I guess my grandmother, my dad's mother, she raised my dad, of course, but yeah, she was a good role model in the sense that my grandmother had 12 grandchildren. And she lived in Alabama, and she was domestic, in other words, she was a maid. And I remember as a kid going to Alabama to see them, and we still had she was working in Mr. Charlie's house, and but the one thing she did was she every year, regardless of what she's making, I mean, I think my dad said she finished like, 4th, 5th grade. And, but every year while she was working in that domestic kitchen, at Christmas, she worked hard to get her 12 grandkids $2 each. And she would send a $6 money order to each house. And, hey, this is $2 for each of those kids. And I was like, man, and so I look at that because now that seed that she put in her grandchildren, when you look at the 12 now, there's nobody in jail. Of the 12, we only had one that passed away a couple of years ago, but nobody's in jail. She's got 2 millionaires. She's got 2 of her grandchildren, 3 of her grandchildren with PhDs. One teaching at Indiana University. Everybody else is solid. Everybody's doing well. They're taking care of their own kids. And so I look at her as a role model, as hard as she had it, the seed that she wanted to plant in the next generation after her, it paid off for her. And again, I just think about the $2 that she scraped for every year for Christmas to say, hey, I'm thinking about y'all. I believe in y'all, go get it. And, so here we are. So, yeah, I mean, us as a people, you could go down the list, every 5-6 years, you got a different person in your generation. When you come up, who else you can consider as your role model. So, but yeah, definitely my grandmother would be the start of it for sure.
I'm sitting here talking about my dad and listening to you guys talking about your family. It made me think about my grandfather too. And I'm blessed to have had both of my grandfathers in my life. But my dad's dad, my grandpa Charlie, he died when I was 7. But I still have vivid memories of that man coming to our house every Sunday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, ringing the doorbell. I'm like, hey, y'all get up. What y'all doing in there? Wake up. It's time to get up. And me running to the door to let grandpa in. I still have those memories. And I sat back and just thought about some of the stories that my dad would talk about or tell me and my sister about grandpa. And, my grandfather was the father of 7 children, 4 boys, 3 girls. And they said, no matter what, that man worked 6 days a week at a slag plant. So he drove this big, gigantic truck that carried slag, and he knew exactly how he was teaching everybody else how to do the job. And they said, no matter how cold it got up on top of that mountain that he was working on, he never missed a day. And they said my grandfather would be drinking like a fish, just trying to relax and everything. But no matter how drunk he got, he never missed a day. And my dad said he and his brothers would be sitting around taking bets about daddy's not going to work today. He's not going to work today. And they said 5 o'clock in the morning, you'd hear him stirring, and he'd get up. If it was in the middle of the winter, he'd layer up and he'd go out that door and never missed a day. So I would like to think that was part of where I got some of my work ethic from, because as I thought about it, my dad, who didn't drink, or he was a social drinker, never missed a day of work. He always went to work. He was always setting the proper example for me and my sister, but especially for me as a black man, constantly challenging me, saying, hey, you know what? It's tough out here. And because of the color of your skin, you have to be better than everybody else. You have to be smarter than everybody else. So he pushed me, and my mother pushed me to get good grades in school. And like I said, unless my dad was on vacation, he never missed a day of work. And I just remembered that. So hearing you guys talking about your grandmothers, it made me think about my grandpa. Again, he passed when I was 7 years old from cancer, so F cancer. But I just wanted to jump in and talk about my grandpa for a hot minute. So
I think about my my aunt as another role model of mine. My mom has one sister and four brothers, and so with them being the only two girls, it was it was different, that's for sure. But my aunt was the first in the family to go to college, and so she provided a template, for success regarding that. Again, no one else in the family had gone to college prior to her. So, she graduated high school with honors, went on to Rutgers, um, became a nurse, and then became an officer in the Army right after that, and spent 20 plus years in the Army. And so, I'm only mentioning her quickly, but she was probably, I would consider her to be my second role model, because I think role models all serve um, a different purpose. While a lot of them, or most of them, may have some of the same traits um, that you would expect from a role model with regards to their behaviors and their morals and their values and things of that nature. I think they come along at different phases of your life and serve a different purpose, right? So my mom was the one where I got that ethic of hard work and seeing how she, made it happen for us regardless of the circumstances. Then my aunt was that one who, again, the first one to go to college, so she provided that template for success in going to college and doing whatever you need to do from there. And then I have my uncles who it's hard to call my uncles role models, to be honest, in a lot of ways, because they were, when I was a kid watching them, it was all about, oh, my uncles, they got all of the girls and they doing this, that, and the other. And that was, it's sort of the things that you're looking at when you're a young boy. um, they weren't really doing all of the right things, that's for sure. But the one thing I will say about my uncles, if I give them credit for anything, and this goes for all four of them, is the fact that they showed me love in a way that Black men still struggle with, I think, in this day and age, but certainly in the 70s, struggled with hard, right? My uncles, I mean, they didn't flinch to tell me they love me. They even kissed me, right? So that was what I knew growing up, and initially I just thought that's how it was, but I would come to find out that no, that was the exception. But yeah, they had no problems kissing me, telling me they love me, hugging me, all the things. um and so I certainly learned that from them. And I give all four of them credit for that. I guess my grandmother put it in all of the kids to be that way, but the four of them had no problems showing me love in the way that I think you should show love to kids, to just to each other, right? I mean, as Black men, why can't we show each other love? I've said that to each of you before. I got love for all of you, and I have no problem saying that. And then, the bishop at my church, I know I talked about him before. He passed away. In fact, the other day was 4 year anniversary of his passing. But he was the first real male role model that I had in my life, honestly. That man he just had a way about him. Um, I mean, he expressed his love all the time as well, just like my uncles did. But even if it wasn't something he was saying, all you had to do was watch him. And just the way he moved, the way he navigated life, was I still am amazed by the kind of person that he was. And it's funny because at his funeral, which was ridiculous. I mean, people ended up having to watch it on closed circuit TV. I mean, you just couldn't even get in. It was ridiculous. Um, but everybody talks about how he made you feel like you were the only person in his life when you were conversing with him, right? And he did that to thousands of people, but to each person, he made them feel like they were special, like you were the most special person in his life. And I learned a lot from that. I think with regards to some of my emotions. I gleaned how to handle some of that from him. And I'll also mention my god brother Mar is just, I can't even say enough about him. I'll probably come back to him. Um, he might be, as far as males go, the most important male role model I've ever had in my life. But one other person I want to mention is Rod. I remember getting to the bureau, and just I was a staff sergeant when I got there, and here he was, just this he had a presence about him, that I think all of you know what I mean by that. He just had this presence, and I immediately kind of just latched on to him, and he took me under his wing, and we we got into some trouble together, had some fun and things like that. But man, when I tell you, just watching him and how he moved, how he navigated politics, the politics of the bureau, and just all of it, and watching him, it really. I would wager to say that, I mean, obviously, y'all know Marie, and she was a big part of that too. But I would wager to say that if not for Rod, I can't know for sure. I'm just not positive that I ever would have been a chief, had it not been for his guidance, and even when he wasn't saying, just me watching him, and he probably didn't even know that I was watching him the way that I was. But yeah, just the way he moved and the way he navigated everything up there um, was just, it was something to behold, and I'll always appreciate you for that too, my brother.
I was sitting here thinking about it, as Ray was talking, and Byron and John and you, and you're right. I think we probably all glean something from one another. But I will tell you that the one thing that jumps off the page for me, and what I admired, because remember, I grew up, kind of like Kev. I was, grew up an only child, and so if it weren't for family and friends, I didn't have a lot of friends. Probably different than Kev, but I didn't have a lot of friends. But you had to find something to gravitate towards. And so one of the things that jumped out for me, for each of you, was that you did what you did your way, right? No matter what, no matter who might have had something to say about it. And I just always admired and respected that. So and it was good to see, because I think there's a lot to be said for standing up and being who you are, because the world has a bunch of opinions. So I certainly appreciated that. and then I also was gonna mention, my mom as well. Couple different frames of thought though. As I listen to us having moms, grandmothers, aunts, sisters, cousins, whomever of the female persuasion, as sort of a role model. So part of me wonders, where really were all the men, in our community, within our environment? And did they really look at their behavior, their actions, how they moved, as being a model for the young lads looking up to them, or related to them, a model for them to follow? Or did that not matter? And so I think at some point in this conversation, the thought about, the responsibility to even, and I won't say necessarily be a role model, but I will say, exhibit behavior that could be emulated if someone so chose to, that they could use for good for their lives or to add value to their lives, as well as those that are going to be dependent on them to have someone to follow. And maybe because I'm older now, but I think a lot about that. And so when I think of role model, that certainly comes to light. And I think of the struggle. I watched my mother, as a single, probably undereducated woman in the inner city who lost the love of her life, when my dad passed, and she had to figure it out. She had this baby boy to try to raise in this environment that wasn't always friendly to men, without a man to help her. So I've always, considered my mother, as a role model for that piece alone, because she showed a lot of strength, a lot of grit. I remember her standing in between me and gang members, and I didn't think a lot of it then. I just thought, this is my mom. She's going to have my back, right? But, as I got older and I thought about really the act or the stand that she took, she was like, no, if you want this one, you got to come through me. And to be able to turn them around with just that statement, so much love for her for that, So I just wanted to mention, moms, for all that moms do. Some would even say they probably do too much for their young men. I'm sure we've all heard that a time or two, but to know that, she did what she had to do because there was no one else to do it, basically. So anyway, I appreciate that. I appreciate the insight and kind words, Kev. And now that I can look back in retrospect, I feel now how important it is and it was to do all that I could, to pave the way, show the way, point out the pitfalls, like, hey, we'll be going to this national conference. You need to understand a couple things, It's just it's the little things you don't even think about, but we've got to, I think consistently, have one another's back, and sometimes their front.
Absolutely.
Too, if they got their head turned around looking the wrong way, so.
Y'all had to bring up national conferences, huh? You just couldn't leave that nowhere. All I'm gonna say is the Christmas. All I'm gonna say is the Christmas photo, and I'm done with that one. That's all I'm saying. But
man.
nah, man, it's so good. I think for us that we, family has probably been our initial, role models. I know for me, it's my parents. My parents were married almost 50 years before my mom passed, but I can never remember one day where they argued. Not one time. I'm like, I know y'all argue. Y'all must have went to the car, went to the store or something. But they never displayed any type of animosity against one another. And my mother told me one time, she said, look, your dad is the man of the house. He just do what he's supposed to do as the man. He don't have to come in here and declare I'm the man of the house. You just do what you're supposed to do. And so I kind of learned from my dad, just do what you're supposed to do and take care of your family, take care of your responsibilities. You don't have to run around and tell people or wear a sign on your back that, I'm the man of the house. So yeah, definitely for me, my mom and dad, just how they worked as together, we didn't have a lot, but they raised us as a unit, how to love one another, Unlike Kevin's uncles, my dad didn't really say I love you a lot, but at the same time, he didn't give me that. Well, I love you because you got a roof over the house. He didn't give me that one either. It's funny, John. I saw John the other day. He had the shirt said I was raised by James Evans. That was my daddy with a Bible. That was my daddy with a Bible. I'm like, dude, he was so nice to other people at church, but at our house, man, that he was laying down the law, dude. It was like, no. But now that I get older, the thing that we would do now is we reflect back on, dang, I was like, nope, I ain't never gonna be like them. And guess what? I operate just like them, So I think a good sign of a role model is if you just take bits and pieces of it. You might not take everything, but if you take bits and pieces of them and it enhance your life, they did their job, And so, that's our hope. That's our goal here. Black Men on Purpose. Take bits and pieces. What we ain't perfect. We're not perfect, but we know what not to do. That's what my mother said. You can learn what not to do from some people. You ain't got to learn everything, but you just learn what not to do, and you can be successful. So
that was so well stated, B. That whole part about taking bits and pieces was extremely well stated, and I agree 100% with that. Yeah, not everything from everybody is going to suit you and what you're trying to do in life, but everyone you meet knows something that you don't, right? And everyone has something to offer, so you take those bits and pieces. I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, man, I love all of that, man, because it gives us such a great segue right here. And I'm gonna try to be quick, cover a lot of ground in a short amount of time. It gives us a great segue into the success stories part of it. But the way Kevin started it, man, all four of y'all. So when I was down in Africa, this is not in chronological order. I'm just all over the place. But I know we used to call up to headquarters. I know it's last week, man. We were using a lot of inside terminology about the military, and there's probably folks that don't know nothing about that, and they was listening like, what the heck are they talking about? But Ray worked up at our headquarters, man, and we used to say, hey, look, if you ever need something done and you get Ray Butler to answer the phone, you in good. It don't matter if it ain't in his section, he gonna take care of you. And I never that was the going thing. Everybody said that, like whether it was people that were out in the field, whether it was us at headquarters, we always said that, and I always paid attention, that I met you, like y'all look at Ray here, he seem all nice and friendly, but if he walk up on you, he got a real commanding, like he just walk up on you, you'd be like, dang, back up off me, man. But no, good, man. And just really, so I just got to the point where I would just call and talk to him and pick his brain. And that really helped me guide. Can't remember which one. I always knew Byron. Byron would call. And so I worked kind of like at a computer help desk, and Byron would call and say, hey, I need my password reset. So I would reset his password. Then he'd be like, and what's my username? And then I'd give him his username, and then he'd be like, what's the website? How do I log in? I'm like, man, just start from the beginning. You don't know how to get there at all. You going backwards, but no. But he always called. I was like, yo, he'd be hustling me. But then, man, I think it was Atlanta, because I remember Penelope Howard and Vanetta had driven up there. And so it had to be Atlanta for them to drive in from Alabama. Man, I remember one time we were sitting in the lobby, and Byron was out there doing what Byron do, man. He was talking about what he had going on, and he was politicking, and he was and then people would say this, and that, man. And the thing about Byron, I noticed this early on, and I was watching, man. He gonna come and he gonna sell his stuff, what he got going on. He gonna tell you who he is and what he got going on. But he don't never take himself so seriously that, y'all see us do it on here all the time. We make him the butt of the jokes, and he roll right with it. Like you can, that unflappability about him. And I was like, okay. So, and he's crazy. But
he's crazy. We all know he's crazy.
But it taught me that I could be my off the wall self and still be professional. Like you ain't never gonna run into Byron and Byron ain't being Byron. You know what I mean? And we know we navigate them spaces where people was being 5 or 6. They wasn't bipolar. They had multiple personality disorder because they were being so many different people, man, and that authenticity, man. And then, Rod and Kev, man, it was the same. Rod just had that presence. And I mean, granted, he had all the stripes on. I think he was a senior when he started supervising me, and I was like a senior airman. So, but man, he had this presence, man. Like, I remember talking to military members on the phone, and you would see their rank and you would think, oh, when I meet them, they're going to be like this, they're going to be sharp. And then you meet them in person and you'd be like, this person's in the military? Like, ugh. But no, Rod was like, they say this is, Senior Master Sergeant Hector, and then you show up and he's everything you expected. He's like, oh, dang, the voice and the prestige and the sharpness and all of that. I didn't think he liked me at first, man, because we bumped heads early on. Like, he was.
Well, I didn't like nobody.
Man, I knew he didn't like me, and I was going to live with it. I still admired him, and I said, I'm just going to take this L. And then one day he called me in the office, and we talking about basketball and how, and I'm like, wait, what? I'm confused. But man, and then later on, it was a beautiful thing when I got up in the ranks and he was retired. He was a civilian. I'd come over there and talk to him, man, and he was venting. Y'all know Rod will get to venting and going off, but he was basically just pouring into us, telling us, hey, y'all need to stand up and really get in there and run recruiting and be leaders, and you need to take care of the people and doing all that. And when I put on chief, I took all of those lessons, man. And we know me and Kev have had that relationship, that mentor-mentee relationship. I was a pain in his side, Sometimes we was bosom buddies, and then sometimes I was a menace. And Kev does not take well to menaces because, boy, I got hit upside the head. So, man, it was mostly one-sided, but I got cussed out a lot by Kev. But I would say all of that to say, y'all were mentoring me, y'all were making impacts. And it was never like y'all just said, oh, my assignment today is to be a mentor to this little knucklehead named John. It was just intuitive. It was who y'all were and who y'all are as men. And I appreciate that. And so as I came into my own as a superintendent, and then, to come up to headquarters to be chief and to run recruiting and all this, it was the lessons and y'all's consistent presence, even through the ranks and through all of the. And so when Rob was talking about where were the men, like that really stuck out to me, because when I was growing up, there just weren't, like, there were older men, like it'd be like men my grandfather's age across the street and in the neighborhood, but there weren't men that were in that generation directly in front of me that could kind of step in and show those things that you could get from a father. That was a real void. And I've noticed in my own life, not to brag, but, I was talking to a close friend of mine, and her son is a young teenager. He's autistic, and, she's a single mother. And we were talking about, he got his hair locked up, and we were talking about do-rags and what he needed to put on his head. And she a woman, so she talking about he need to get a bonnet, and he ain't trying to hear that. and so she was like, in my mind, I've already designated you as you're going to be the male figure in his life to help him navigate these things. And I said, I was thinking the same thing, I'm going to be there. And so he's 13, 14, and, to know that I have young men all the way up to the range. I think Justin's going to be 30 this year. So all the way from 30 to 14, these young men where I've stepped up because they were coming from single mother homes. And because of what has been poured into me, I knew that was missing at that age for me when I was a teen. And I take full responsibility that I quit on sports, or I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I was a knucklehead. I take responsibility for that. But I imagine if I would have had a man like me that was carrying himself the way that I carried myself, that had my resume, that would have came in and said, hey, I'm going to put my arms around you. I'm going to show you the ropes, the difference it may have made in my life. And, I'm no regrets, but that success story to know that I have these young men that I'm still in contact with to this day. I still advise, we still kick it. I get to watch them go from boys to men and be a part of that. I think that's really the success stories, is that because so much has been given to me, I think it's just an honor that I have something to give because of what y'all have poured into me.
And reciprocity is important, right? And I know you said you didn't have a lot of that, and I didn't have a lot of it either. I did have some with regards to male role models, and I think to me reciprocity is very important, right? It's crucial that we, whether you're someone who had it and you need to give back, or even if you're someone who didn't have it but you understand the importance of it now, and so now you need to go out and provide that what you needed when you were younger, to go out and provide that. And then I think as Black males, you know, it is so important to be a role model to other young Black men, to other Black men in general, right? Because what other way are Black men going to be more than what the circumstances dictate they would naturally be as a Black man in this country, right? Which we all know what that is. And so, yeah, I think reciprocity for me is just so important, to be able to pour into other, again, whether they be young Black men or just Black men in general. I think about a conversation that I had just today with someone. Is a guy. I think everyone knows that I'm a faculty member at Capella, even though this is my last quarter at Capella. But there's a guy who I think, in fact, I want to say Anton is maybe two black man. I think he's 2 or 3 years older than me. But I had him about 2 quarters ago. I was his instructor, and so he reached out to me today. He graduated last week, and he reached out to me, and well, he reached out on Friday and we scheduled something for today. And he was picking my brain about some things. Hey man, now that I'm done, I got that DR in front of my name. I'm trying to figure out what my next move is, how I navigate. And we had some conversations about that. I just gave him I tried to pour into him what I could. And he said, that's why I reached out to you. He said, because he said, we only worked together for a quarter. He said, I spent, I think, 3 or 4 years, or 4 or 5 years actually, in this program. He said, and I had 3 people who impacted me greatly, and you were one of them. He said, just not only as someone who's around my age, but just as a Black man, who, the way you moved, it resonated with me. He says, and just the fact that everything that you just said to me on this call is everything I knew that I would get. And that's why I reached out to you. And I don't say that, I don't mention any of that to be braggadocious. I truly do not. I mention it because that's what it's all about, right? It's all about being there for each other, helping each other navigate this thing we call life, right? We start off the show saying that every week. And it's just so important to be there for each other. No matter whether we're talking about a young Black male or Black male in general, and no shade to Black women at all, right? We've all talked about the Black women in our lives who have been role models, and that's important. But Rod and well, actually, I think all 4 of you in some ways touched on this, but there's just something that, as a Black male, you can't get from a woman, right? Like, men, we share a common language, so to speak, right? We have um, similar experiences as Black males. We have similar struggles as Black males that a woman can't relate to. Just like women have certain struggles and certain things that they go through that men can't comprehend or empathize with, because we have never, will never be able to experience that. And so it's important to have, as a male, to have a male in your life who is a role model, someone that you can look up to, someone that you can go to and say, hey, look, I'm experiencing this certain thing, and I didn't want to talk to mom, I didn't want to talk to whoever, because I know they can't relate in a way that a male can, right? So it's important for us to do that and be that for others.
Just a couple things. I definitely wanted to repeat what Kevin said about Rod. Rod, you have been a huge role model for me. And one thing I appreciate about you, and we'll all find it funny, Rod don't cuss. but Rod can cuss you out without cussing. And I have seen Rod do it, and I'm sitting there like, man, I wish I could be like that. And then, here it is. And when I start going, I start cussing. I can't help myself. but
Man,
but
I
on the
cuss a
serious,
lot. That is a superpower.
that is my superpower. But bro, it's everybody said it. The way you walk into a room, your presence, your knowledge, your calmness. It meant a lot to me. So I wanted you to know how much I appreciate all four of you. But that was one thing I wanted to touch on real quick. And then also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my mom. My mom is an outright superhero in my book. I know I get on her nerves. She really was the head of the house because my dad was always working. And, I was always afraid of letting my mom down. And my mom was one of those, I think she was the original Tupac. I really do, because my mom would be like, I ain't a killer, but don't push me. My mom showed up to schools. I'll never forget my varsity basketball coach in high school wanted me to go to this basketball camp, and I told him I couldn't go because I had responsibilities. I had to watch my sister. He called me a liar. And I got home and my mom was like, well, what's wrong with you? And I told her what happened. She said, your coach said what? And I'm like, yeah, he told me I was lying. Next thing I know, the next day, I'm coming down into the lunchroom, and this is my junior year. And my buddy Roselle was like, man, what the hell did you do? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, your mom is here. I'm like, what? And next thing you know, you could hear through the lunchroom, the office had to be about 200 feet away. You could hear my mother like she was standing in the lunchroom. And she was ripping up the assistant principals, the principal, and I don't want to hear Jack get his aide down here right now. And next thing you know, she was lighting him up. But my mom, as a Black woman, she started out working at General Electric, and her desire was to own her own business. My mom became one of the best cosmetologists in Ohio, and she opened up her own business. And I'm proud to say that I come from that cloth. And now here it is. She's teaching my daughter certain things about owning her own business, because that's what my daughter is looking at doing, or my daughter has her own business. My daughter just established her own LLC, and she's getting tips from my mom. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention my mom as a role model.
The next generation, for me, it will be almost every 5-6 years, there's somebody who stepped up and helped me get to the next level. Of course, you start off at home. Like I said, you go back with my parents. You don't see them as a role model till later, right? Remember, at 10 years old, my football coach at 10, his name was H.C. Story, hardworking man from Alabama, worked at B.F. Goodrich, the tire plant. Back then in the 70s and 80s, everybody, if you get on at the plant, you're gonna be good. So and so that's what he did. So he coached football, basketball, softball, and he challenged young Black men to be better. It's not just about being on the field, on the court. I just need you to be a better person. And so when he passed in 2016, it was just people that came from all over the place, that he impacted their lives as their coach. Even Rod Woodson came back, to give props to AC Story. So it's like, here's this man who didn't, most of us, we have family members that did not have the ability or the time or the resources to go to school to get a formal education, but they gave us an education that was far better than a piece of paper, And so, and then not, recently in the last 10 years, I would say Professor George Harrison. I give him credit because he got me fired from a job, and then he turned around and said, "Okay, it's time for you to go get your master's. Now it's time for you to, go get your PhD." And the roles flipped, because at 80 years old, he wanted to write his first book, and it's called Black Excellence. So, again, we're put here on earth to inspire somebody to do better. And like I said, they may not like all of our stories, they may not like part of our story, but one thing I learned, it says, don't judge me by the chapter of my life that you walked in on. Because if you do, you might not like it, but go to the end of the story. And so our role models have been very, very inspirational to all of us. So I appreciate everything they've done. I appreciate you fellas too. We had some stuff that we had to endure to get here, but we made it.
Yeah.
We had to endure some stuff, but we here. So I appreciate y'all.
About enduring stuff to get to where you are today. And if you look back at the vast and varied, history of our ancestors and, with this country, the one thing that, I was thinking about that just kind of jumps out is the fact that we alone couldn't do it and didn't do it, right? And we needed help from people that didn't look like us and didn't necessarily come from our communities. And sometimes, I think that gets lost, and so I just wanted to make mention that, I was thinking actually a couple weeks ago about what helped to shape kind of some of my thinking from a financial perspective. And I will tell you, coming into the military, I worked for, or who hired me actually and brought me into the military, Jerry Poland. Shout out to him. If people, worked at the Guard Bureau, you probably know him, retired chief. But as a superintendent of the CBPO that I first worked in, I mean, he literally took me under his wing and taught me.
That's a personnel office for those who don't know what that is.
Oh yeah. Consolidated Base Personnel Office. Yeah, my bad. but he literally, took me under his wing. He was familiar with North Philadelphia, where I grew up. And he had spent some time, in Philadelphia and passing through Philadelphia. And he's like, man, that was a fairly tough neighborhood you grew up in, and so I think at that time we kind of connected because I'm like, wow, you don't even look like me, but you understand the community that I come from. And so he's like, yeah, he said, so, you can do and be anything you want in this space. And if you want to, I'll show you how to. And so I will always, be indebted to him for just taking the time and the position that he was in and basically teaching me everything I needed to know. And not just teaching me from a knowledge perspective, but also, when you talk about being able to navigate, the politics and some of the businesses and offices that I think most people probably run into, but being able to do that, he literally was a master at it. And so just watching him move and navigate, I think I picked up on some things that probably helped me along my way, but was just always appreciative, of the fact that he was willing to pour into me in that way. And then the superintendent that replaced him that I had, Roger Morrison, shout out to Roger from Niagara Falls, New York. One of the smartest guys I've ever known. And he was all about teaching people to become financially literate. So just imagine me as a, 21, 22-year-old, not knowing anything about money other than you had to have some if you were going to pay rent and buy groceries. But he introduced me to investing, and I will tell you that literally changed my financial trajectory in life. It did, and I'm forever grateful to him for taking the time to do that, because I knew nada, right? We didn't have money growing up, so I certainly couldn't be taught about it other than you need it. So,
right.
but yeah, I just wanted to mention that because sometimes it can sometimes get lost, especially when we're talking about just our own community. But it really it takes others that are willing to also contribute and pour in. So
one thing I think is interesting, and certainly the last couple of B and Rod, you all both just mentioned it, and at some point, John and Ray alluded to the same as did I. As important as it is to be a role model, right, and to have role models, what's maybe more important, certainly just as important, is listening to them, right? Because and what I mean by that is we've all talked about how, and I think B, you pretty much said it, that at every few years, you said every 5 or 6 years or so, but essentially at these certain times in our life, right? Somebody was there when we needed it. Some role model was there to say the right thing to us. But just as important, and again, maybe more importantly, is we listened, right? We took that advice, whatever it was they said, um, we picked up on it and we ran with it, because it doesn't make sense to have a mentor in your life who's, trying to, kind of pass on their knowledge and wisdom to you, to help you be a better person, to help you grow, to help you get where you want to get, if you're not actually listening and doing what they're suggesting you do. So again, I just wanted to throw that, and that may sound obvious, well, yeah, but it's not, because how many people are out there whose lives are not what they would want it to be, but they had role models. But the problem is they didn't listen to those role models, right? They didn't take their suggestions, their recommendations, and heed their advice, their warnings, their whatever. And so now their life is someplace other than what they would want it to be. And had they heeded what they had in their role models, maybe they would be in a different place. So again, I just wanted to throw that out there. I think it's very important that you not only have and be a role model, but you also listen to what it is they have to say. Well, with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us. As we wrap up this week's episode, I want to leave you with a quote from the great Jackie Robinson, who said, "A life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives." Until next time, peace.